Hello, everyone. You are listening to Those Are the Girls with Mallory and Friends. I'm Mallory,
I'm Victoria.
and we are changing culture and bringing back traditional values.
All right, guys, we have an awesome guest on today. We have Mary Kate Knorr. Mary Kate developed a passion for women's healthcare during her time as the executive director of Illinois' Right to Life. As she traveled to speak and teach about abortion, it became clear to her that a lot larger conversation on the culture and quality of women's health care needs to occur. Feminae, how do you pronounce it, Mary Kate?
Feminae Vero. You were
I
good.
got it.
Yeah.
Feminae Vero was
I've been
born.
butchered up.
Feminae,
Continue.
Feminae Vero was born from her desire to make life-affirming, solutions-oriented healthcare available for all women, regardless of their socioeconomic backgrounds. Prior to her work in the pro-life movement, Mary Kate was an operative and communications advisor in numerous state and federal political campaigns. She was quoted in the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, the New Yorker, the Washington Post, and has been featured on WGN, ABC7, CBS, and Fox News, among others. In the past 2 years alone, Mary Kate has spoken before thousands on the need for abortion restrictions in Illinois. She has presented to law and medical students at Northwestern University and to undergraduates at the University of Chicago, where she debated Professor Jeffrey Stone, who was a clerk on the U.S. Supreme Court when Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973. Welcome, Mary Kate.
Yes. Okay. I did not know some of that. That is really cool. Specifically, that last sentence. That is really, really cool.
To date, the wildest day of my life. I won't lie to you. It was crazy. The Lord just made things happen. It was crazy. And the guy was so flustered when it was over, which was
really
the coolest thing ever. Yeah. It was awesome.
What was his arguments? Can you give us a brief synopsis of what happened that day before we get into
for sure. For sure. It's so funny because I had spoken at the University of Chicago for their pro-life group. They have it's not Students for Life, but it's like a similar type of group on campus. And it was the worst speaking engagement I've ever had. I had more protesters in the room than students, and they were throwing stuff at me and calling me a white supremacist and all these crazy things. And I actually was afraid for my well-being. This is the only time this is the only time that's ever happened to me. And so I left, and as I was driving home from the worst event of my life, I had an invitation in my inbox to come back to the University of Chicago to debate this professor. And I was like, I would have to be nuts to take this invitation. And I just took it to prayer, and I just felt no, I need to go. I need to show up, even if it's going to be terrible. And I had all my prayer warriors praying for me during this. And I was super prepped. I was watching all of the abortion debate videos I could find on YouTube leading up to this. And I don't know what it was, but the Lord just gave me the right words. And this guy, Professor Stone, who was a clerk on the U.S. Supreme Court, obviously, as it says in my bio, when Roe v. Wade was decided on, he was going to all of the classic arguments that that the public wanted this, and that majority had, the majority rule had spoken, and all these things. And he was specifically, I think the thing that really stopped him up is that he was saying that the stat at the time was that there were more women dying from back alley abortions than there were women dying from, or something like that. It was there was a really high number of women dying from back alley abortions at that time, which we now know because Bernard Nathanson, who was the founder of NARAL, has since said that was a full stop lie, blatant lie. They just
everybody pay attention to that. It was a lie.
They made that up. Yeah. And I said that in the debate, and this guy was jaw on the floor, did not know what to say. And it was just one of those moments that I was the Lord gave me that, because I don't even know how I knew that was true, but it was crazy. So all to say, the Lord will deliver us the truth in the moments that we need it, because to this day, that was the most miraculous interaction I've ever had. This man who played such a pivotal role in that ruling, and I'm standing across the room from him, and I was dude, you're wrong and you're lying. And he had nothing to say in response. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Was everybody kind of quiet, or were people cheering? Wow.
People were mostly quiet. I think there were like a handful of pro-life people in the room who, like, when I said it, they were all like, like silently like fist pumping in the back of the room. But like, yeah, it was just so wild. I'll never forget it. It was crazy.
What was the response in the room? So you said it was like a few pro-lifers, mainly pro-choice or pro-abortion. We clarify here, not pro-choice, pro-abortion. So there's mostly pro-abortioners.
Yeah.
What was the atmosphere like at the end? Because you pretty much like beat them.
Sounds like you won. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think I can honestly say that I silenced this guy when it was all said and done. And that's, I think, what their response was too, is all these students who were super pro. I like that pro-abortion. They were just like silenced. And that's the thing, is like, at least my experience has been that when you encounter people who are like so strong for the left and so strong for like the choice movement or whatever, the abortion industry, when they are encountered with an argument that they can't combat, they just either say nothing or they resort to like personal attacks. And I think in that one moment, like, the Lord just gave me the grace that everyone was silenced. But like, in the experience I had prior to that, it was personal attacks. So it was like attacks about my appearance, attacks, calling me a white supremacist, throwing things at me, like things that are personal, that don't actually address the idea of whether or not abortion is right or wrong, but just like attack me as a person. And like, Mallory, you've been at these protests, you know what it's like these people are crazy and very, very violent, and really aggressive, and they don't hold back ending the group that you're encountering at the time. So it's crazy.
My husband's my husband's in politics, so
is he? So
we got this Democrat candidate goes, my dog's cuter than your dog, and that was her only argument. I go, hold my earrings, that's my firstborn child.
Yeah, like, and another place people can get really nasty is social media. And I do feel like when people don't have, like you said, when people don't have the argument, they will resort to any and everything, because the reality is, I think that people just aren't educated.
Totally.
So there are some pro-lifers as well that just aren't educated. So they're encountering pro-aborts that aren't educated. So they're having these uneducated conversations, and then they meet people who are educated, and then they don't know what to say, which is why I think, for example, this is a good segue. I think what you're doing is so important. And I think like podcasts like this and like, other podcasts that talk about these things is so important, because the biggest problem I think that we are facing in this movement, in this whole life, pro-life, conservative, or whatever we want to call this, anything, is education. People just really do not know, because, I'll say, and I share this story all the time, but I want to say it again. So if your first time listening to this podcast, will be your first time hearing the story. When I was in undergrad, I was having a conversation with these girls who are my acquaintance. Well, we were friends at the time. Now we like don't talk at all, but we're having a conversation about like, one of them was like sleeping with her boyfriend and what would happen if she got pregnant. And she just so casually said that, oh, well, I just go get an abortion and then he take me out to Italian afterwards. And everybody's just hee ha ha. And it was just so, it made me feel icky. I was like, okay, guys, can we just change the topic? Like, I didn't want to talk about it anymore. But my whole reason for saying this is like, I think a lot of it comes from education. Like, I think people, especially in our generation, because it's been so glamorized, think that it's just like going in to get a tooth removed. You go under, get the tooth removed, you wake up, it might be a little sore, but then you move on with your day. You get Italian, totally, and then you enjoy your night. But it really isn't that way. We need to be educated. Totally. So with that being said, Mary Kate, tell us why you're even on the podcast.
So, well, Mallory, you and I know each other from Students for Life. I was in the pro-life movement for, I think, about three and a half years full time.
Can I ask real quick, how did you get into the pro-life movement?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. I was in Republican politics prior to that. I love politics. I went to school in Iowa, and I went to school to be a journalist. And while I was a journalism student, I covered for the Daily Iowan the Republican caucus in Iowa, which, like, if you are, political at all, or if you follow politics at all, you might know that the Iowa caucus is just kind of like this epic historic event every couple of years. I guess it's every 2 or 4 years. Yikes, I should know that. In
It should
Iowa.
be 4.
Is it 4?
The
I think it's
caucus
4.
for the president.
Yeah, I think you're right. Every 4 years. That's basically how the president, that's like the test run for all the presidential candidates in a, you know, like when they're still in the nominee pool, they like go out to Iowa and Wisconsin and some of the other swing states, and they, you know, like test run their campaign. And Iowa is important because the caucus is the first like primary / caucus for the presidential like nomination process, basically. So it's like a big deal to win the Iowa caucus, even though ironically, the person who wins the Iowa caucus is like almost never the actual candidate, which I think is kind of funny. Nevertheless, the process is important. So I was doing that and was just like getting really into it. Like I just was like really enjoying it, really felt like I was learning a lot, getting a lot of exposure to issues that I really cared about, that I felt like were really important. And decided like, I don't want to be a journalist. It's hard for me to be unbiased. I have too many opinions. I want to be in politics. And so I decided to pursue a political communications career. So I was on a couple of campaigns in Iowa. I worked for the lieutenant governor. She's now the governor of the state, Kim Reynolds. And then I came back to Illinois, where I'm originally from, and worked on a congressional campaign for a candidate who was super pro-life. And really through her campaign, started to pay really close attention to how the life issue affects politics. And I had always been pro-life. I'd been in the March for Life in in high school. But this was really the first time that I like really as an adult was thinking for myself through the issue, and also like kind of applying it to this political knowledge that I had gained over the last few years. So really started paying close attention to that issue. I was back in the state of Illinois, not 6 months later, but Governor Bruce Rauner, who was the Republican governor of Illinois in 2016, he became the first Republican governor in U.S. history to initiate the taxpayer funding of abortion. So he signed a bill into law in Illinois that allocated taxpayer money to abortions through Medicaid.
And he was a Republican?
And he's a Republican.
That's very interesting.
So yeah, it's like a funny story because he ran his whole campaign as like a moderate. So he was like, I'm a fiscal Republican, but socially I'm like a little more on the fence. And so he promised all the Republicans in the state to get me elected, but I won't touch social issues. Like we don't agree on social issues, so I just won't touch them, which the Republicans in the state of Illinois should have known better, because his wife was on the board of Planned Parenthood in the state of Illinois at the time. So they should have known better. Or let me back up. If she wasn't on the board, she was like a supporter for sure, like an outspoken supporter. People knew she supported Planned Parenthood in Illinois. So anyway, flash forward, he signs this bill into law, huge uproar. Half of his staff walks out of the office. They like quit day of the signing. And I was just like irate. I went to a rally. Actually, funny enough, Mallory, David Cordero, who's now the communications director at Students for Life. He was a regional coordinator for Illinois at the time. I went to a rally that he planned. This was the first day I ever met David in 2016. He planned this rally in downtown Chicago. I went, I was irate. I heard all these Illinois politicians speak. I met David, and I was like, I have to be full-time in the pro-life movement. Like, how like we get so cocky. You're like, they need my skills.
No, I
was like, I have something to bring to the table here. So
no,
I went home and applied for the executive director position at Illinois Right to Life, thinking
executive director. Wow, you go.
Exactly. Like I didn't like waste any time with anything else. Thinking like there's no way they'll hire me for this job unless they're desperate. And I guess they were desperate because they hired me.
That's great.
Yeah, praise God. It was like such an answered prayer, because I just didn't really know where like the Lord wanted me, and he put me where he wanted me, like it's as simple as that, to be honest. Yeah. So that's how I ended up in the pro-life movement. So I was at Illinois Right to Life for about 2.5 years. And then while I was at Illinois Right to Life, I met Kristen, kind of got to know her, Kristen Hawkins, who's the president of Students for Life. And Kristen called me last May and asked me if I'd consider taking a job with Students for Life. And I kind of hemmed and hawed over it. And she and I went back and forth over a few months. And then ultimately I decided to take the job. And so I was with Students for Life, not for very long, for about 6 months. Yeah. And then I think you and I met when you were SCOTA squad, right?
Yeah, in DC.
In DC, which was so fun.
So were you part of SCOTA squad?
No, I was like
in
one of the
charge
staff
of
that
us,
was
kind
kind of, yeah, I was like kind of around for SCOTA squad. But I was in and out of DC a lot during that like
And
period, that Amy season.
okay, so you remember, Victoria and everybody listening, when we were talking about Melanie and I went to our very first like big rally thing, and we were sitting waiting around for the rest of the Students for Life people, and Mary Kate was one of the people that came in with the bullhorn super loud, and we were like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing now.
This is what it is.
Mary Kate, she's like super hardcore, y'all.
That was like the craziest day. Oh my gosh.
That was so crazy. And that was when the other Autumn got punched. Yeah, that was so crazy.
That was a crazy day.
Yeah.
Wow. That was the first, you guys had just arrived like that afternoon, hadn't you?
Yeah. Well, I had been there the day 2 days before for something else.
Okay.
And then I left literally I almost missed my flight. I left right after that. And then I came right back like 3 days later, just because like I was already going to be in DC. And then Steph called me and was like, hey, do you want to come to DC for these dates? And I was like, oh, I'm already going to be in DC. So let me like think about it. And she's like, well, how about you just stay? And like, I couldn't pack for I like 1 day to pack for an entire 6 or 7 weeks. Yeah. So I was like, well, I'm going to go and come back. So I ended up going and coming back. But yeah, amazing. That was crazy. Yeah. Mary Kate is amazing.
Thank you. I mean, you guys are all amazing. I did it for a couple weeks. I don't know how you guys did it for almost 2 months, a month and a half.
Yeah, it was like a month and a half.
Oh my gosh, that was a long time for you guys to be in that itty bitty apartment.
Yeah, it was fun though. Like we got really close.
That's really good.
Yeah.
There could have easily been drama in that place. So it's nice that you guys all got along and that it was fun.
I know. That's what we talked about. Like, how often do you get this many girls with one bathroom and technically 2 beds to live together and not have a bunch of fights and stuff? So.
Truly. Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, so tell us about your organization.
Yeah, we're gonna have topic.
We're like chatting about
usual. It's nothing
protests.
New.
Yeah. Just,
Yeah. So I guess my experience in the pro-life movement was such that I was always left kind of frustrated that I feel like we don't talk enough about, we don't challenge the left's narrative on quote unquote reproductive health care as much as I think we could and should. So like Planned Parenthood, for example, NARAL, the ACLU, all of these leftist organizations out there are constantly touting this they're touting this reproductive health care phrasing as though they have a monopoly on women's health. And not only is that false, it's so contradictory to what women's health care actually should look like and what it needs to look like. And I just find that totally abhorrent. And I wish that the pro-life movement would do more to kind of speak into that. I think that we talk about it, but not enough. And so while I was at Illinois Right to Life, there was a period of time that I really was trying to push us in a direction that we could talk a little bit more about what does women's healthcare actually look like? And why are some of these tactics that doctors use to put a Band-Aid on women's health issues? The artificial hormonal birth control pill being one of them, which I'll get to in a second.
We're super anti-birth control here.
Yeah. Cool. Why is it problematic that they, try to stick that Band-Aid onto every issue? There's just so much that we could talk about. And I wanted to talk about those things at Illinois Right to Life. And at a certain point, our board president, I mean, God bless her, she's incredible at this work and this is really passionate about these issues. But I think from her perspective, that just wasn't what our focus was. Our focus was talking about abortion. And I just really felt called to expand the conversation, that we have to talk about the whole breadth of women's healthcare, not just this one single thing that the left has convinced the culture is a necessary health procedure. There's so much more to it than that.
Yeah.
So so my sister, I woke up in the middle of the night in November at like 2 a.m. and was just like flooded with like, oh my gosh, this is what we need to do. Like, this is what this organization needs to look like. And I was like sleeping at my parents' house at the time. I live in the city of Chicago in West Loop. I was down in Joliet where my parents are from. I like ran down to their kitchen and I pulled out a pad of paper and I just started taking like crazy notes. And I literally got on my computer in that moment and like registered for articles of incorporation. Filed articles of incorporation with the state of Illinois, because it was just like such a moment of clarity that like I was like, no, like I have to do this right now. Like, even if it amounts to nothing, I have to do it right now. Like, action. I have to take action right now. So I did it. And then like woke up the next morning and I like told my sister, like my sister is also really passionate about this stuff. And I told her like that this is what I had done and all these things. And so she was like, yeah, I'm on board. And she was like, actually, it's really funny that you bring this up because I've spent the last couple of weeks writing a curriculum that's a Christian approach to teaching the woman's cycle and her whole biology of her fertility. So like,
oh my God.
I love this.
Yeah,
so
it's
much.
amazing. My sister is incredible. She's amazing. So she basically wrote this curriculum and we're still kind of working on it. This is our big project for the summer. But she wrote this curriculum that basically takes every phase of a woman's like biological fertility, basically. So like prepubescent, pubescent, like going through puberty, fertile, pregnant, whatever, like the whole spectrum of her fertility. And she basically put them within the context of different like biblical and figure and like other female figures from church tradition. And she basically said like, okay, we can look at like the mother of Mary, or we can look at Mary herself as the mother of Jesus, or we can look at like, all these different, she like laid out these different biblical figures who were experiencing this part of their fertility, phases of fertility at this portion of their lives in the Bible.
Whoa.
And she like laid it all out. So it's really incredible. I'm like so excited for it to come to fruition. We're hoping to have it done by the end of the summer, but I called her the next day after I did all this and I had told her like, this is what I did. And she was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Cause I've been working on this curriculum. And we were like, okay, this is divine providence. Like the Lord is inspiring both of us at the same time. We have to make this into something. So I was still with Students for Life at the time. And then come January, I parted ways with Students for Life and I just was like, I have to go at this with everything I have. Like it's now is the time. It's now or never. So it's just, we launched in January. I was able to raise enough money to get through about 3 months worth of work. So actually tomorrow is like the official release of our website that I've spent the last couple of weeks building. And we had an event last week that we like got a bunch of women together to take pictures for the website. And yeah, it's been awesome. But the whole purpose, sorry, I'm like rambling and spewing.
No, this is all really good information.
Okay, great. I'm so glad. Yeah. So the whole purpose of the organization, the name of the organization is Feminae Vero, which in Latin means feminine truth. And it's all focused on education. So like you said, Mallory, like educating the public, educating women, educating girls specifically on what their bodies actually do, why this is miraculous, why it fits with the Christian teaching about human sexuality and all of these other things. And then also like, why this matters for the culture, why it matters when we talk about abortion, why it matters when we talk about, birth control, why it matters when we talk about all of these issues that have been deemed quote unquote political. So education is the main piece. And then also we, are really focused on advocacy, but not necessarily in like the traditional sense, the way that we hear the word advocacy. Like we really want to empower women to be advocates for themselves. So
I love that.
The majority of encounters that a woman will have related to her health when it comes to an issue like this, if she's a conservative woman who's concerned with saving herself for marriage or not going on artificial hormonal birth control, or, like the list goes on and on of things that a conservative Christian woman, the healthcare she might not want to receive or buy into. Our goal is to really empower those women to have those educated conversations with their doctors in a way that they can be confident and know what they're talking about and know what questions to ask, and also really have like that confidence to say to their doctor, I'm not buying what you're selling, That's really what we aim to do. So what does that look like? I mean, there is a part of that there that I think we have a role to play in terms of educating elected officials, because they are writing policy and they are impacting like what the federal government or state governments actually can pay for, which is important. But there's also a piece in terms of like educating medical professionals. There are a lot of doctors who, because this is the world they've been operating in for 20 years, they don't actually really know that the pill doesn't solve endometriosis, for example, or that it doesn't solve like some of these other health issues.
PCOS, right?
Yeah, PCOS.
Yeah, two separate things. And then
two separate things.
Yeah.
There's a whole list. Like there is a whole list of things that, and like that's kind of the thing that's been interesting to me in learning about all of this, because my sister is a fertility care practitioner. So she actually teaches charting methods. She teaches women how to chart their fertility cycle.
Nice.
She's more of like the healthcare piece of this. I'm definitely the more political piece. And so I'm still like learning a lot of the scientific aspects of all of these things. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's amazing to me is that a lot of women who show up at Planned Parenthood and some of these other like abortion clinics actually show up there because they're having issues with their period. They're like having really painful periods, or they're having like super excessive bleeding.
I went on the pill for acne.
Yes, that is a big one. And I personally have been in arguments with my dermatologist about the fact that I don't want to go on the pill for acne. That is a really tough one. And gosh, I mean, like this is so common, right? Like we have so many different aspects of healthcare as women that they're telling us it's your hormones that are the problem. You need to just get your hormones under control, you know? And the pill is interesting because the pill, it's like a total facade. It gives you this impression that you have control, but really what you're doing is you're like stopping the very natural processes of your body that are like indicators that things are actually working the way they're supposed to be working. There's an incredible book called The Fifth Vital Sign that basically makes the case for why the woman's period is her fifth vital sign.
Okay. Oh, okay. So really quick, Victoria and I are reading this book by this lady. She's not,
her name's Alyssa Vitti. Have you heard of her?
I think I've heard of her. Yeah.
She wrote. Sorry.
No, go ahead. What's the name?
I was going to say she wrote the books Woman Code and In the Flow. But
I've heard of both of those.
Yeah, she was on the Boss Babe podcast talking about like hormones and periods and all that. And she was like, when you're on the pill and you're on the sugar, like your sugar week to have your period, that's not a real period.
Yes,
it's a syndicated period. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing because you did not ovulate that month.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. And I'm just really glad we're talking about this now because we're both reading the book, skimming the book. We're trying to work on getting our hormones, like you were saying, like it's not necessarily like this is what our body is designed to do. So there's no reason for us to fight it. It's very natural. Like we need to work with it, and you're not educated enough about it. That's why I'm so glad that you guys are doing this, because I mean, even in the book, just some of the things, and like I said, I don't even think she's a Christian. I mean, she's made a few Christians, to me, because everything's so polarized now. I think
she's more left.
Totally.
Some of the things she says is definitely more left, but her big philosophy is she's like, there's no reason for women to be miserable when they're on their period. There's no reason for women to have major cramps and feel sick. It's because we're not treating our bodies the way we're supposed to be treating them. Like during wherever you are in your cycle, like you're supposed to be doing like this types of workouts, eat certain types of foods based on where you are on your cycle.
That's one of my favorite discoveries with all of this. It is fascinating. So I just was told by somebody recently that the USA women's soccer team actually figured this out, that like if they train based on their cycles, it's amazing.
Like biohacking with your cycle. Like right now, I'm on my period, so I've been kind of napping, kind of laying low, not doing too crazy heavy workouts. But when I always do the ovulation period. It's either the one like the period right before ovulation or ovulation. But that's when like you're the most creative, you have the most energy. That's when you're supposed to be kind of
that's
like
the one I'm in right now.
Yeah, so that's when you're kind of like brainstorming and like you're motivated to get stuff done. That's when you should be doing high intensity workouts, stuff like that.
And
but
we don't talk about these things.
Totally. Women have no idea. Like no idea. I
But
remember the first time I ever sat through my sister's, my sister has like a presentation she gives on the woman's cycle to like intro people to charting and what that means. And the first time I sat through it, Yeah. Oh my gosh, you totally should. She's so smart. And she's also a NICU nurse. So she also has all this experience with the baby's side of it too. Yeah.
Wow.
She's a pro. But I was like jaw on the floor when I sat through her intro session the first time. This was probably in like 2016. I remember watching it and like literally thinking like, how has no one ever told me this before? Like I'm 28 years old. So I was 23, 24 at the time. How has no one told me that this is what my body does? Like I'm 25 years old. You know what I mean? It's just crazy to me. It's crazy.
I'm Catholic, and it was when my husband and I we got married in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And so part of the whole process of like premarital stuff is learning how to have sex and not get pregnant.
Yeah.
Because the church doesn't believe in birth control, but I was on it for my face.
Mm-hmm.
But
face.
it was really interesting because I'm like, when like in high school, like we were not taught our cycles. We were taught, okay, if you don't want to have a baby, then don't have sex.
Exactly.
If you want to have sex but don't want to have the baby, go on birth control, use condoms, all this stuff. Yep. And I think that's why we do have these like pregnancy, like teenage pregnancy a lot of the time is because
100%.
if you're 1 minute off the pill, then your percentage goes from like 99 to like 60.
Yes.
And,
really?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're not taught that it's like, okay, if you track your cycle, because when you're on the pill, you can't track your cycle. You don't have one. So you don't know when you're ovulating. And when you're ovulating is when you can get pregnant. So you know not to really have sex when you're ovulating.
Yep.
But we're not taught that.
The thing that is so sinister to me about the pill, and again, this is me, I'm Catholic as well. Like the thing that's so sinister to me is that basically what the pill does is it tricks your body into thinking you're pregnant. So like you might bleed, but your body thinks that you're pregnant, and that's why you're not ovulating.
So my body
taking a dose of estrogen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my body thought I was in menopause. So I gained 40. I never had issues gaining weight. I gained 40 pounds in 2 years when I was on the pill.
Yeah.
Because my body thought I was in menopause. So it was saving like fat cells and all this stuff.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Isn't it? And yeah, gosh, I could go on and on. It's just, it's to me that we've been tricked into thinking that the pill is good for women. Like, have you guys heard this story of like, okay, so when they first were inventing the pill, they ran tests on, they were doing two at the same time. They were doing a male hormonal birth control pill and they were doing a female hormonal birth control pill, and they were running tests at the same time. 3 women died during their testing of the female birth control pill, and the men experienced sorry to like use this phrasing, the men experienced shrinkage, and they were like, oh hell no, this isn't going to work, we can't do this, can't have this pill. But then the women, they were like, oh, we'll just lower the dosage, the women will be fine. And it's amazing to me because I feel like you get these leftist feminists who are like, oh, all the patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. All of these men are just out to take our rights. But the reality is the movement of people who created the hormonal birth control pill were so interested, had so much interest in leveraging women for the purpose of preventing pregnancy that they're literally risking women's lives, like to the extent that they knew that women could die from this pill, but they were willing to say, oh, we'll just lower the dosage. And then men, it's like you're telling me that we're the misogynists here when we're the ones who've been saying all along this was a bad idea. I just think that's incredible. Like the cognitive dissonance is amazing to me.
So when the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I think I saw this stat. So they're like, oh, it's like 6 people out of like the 7 million or whatever had blood clots. And then there's a stat saying that with birth control, 1 out of 1,000 women get blood clots that are on birth control.
Isn't that wild?
We pulled a COVID vaccine off the market because 6 women got it, but we haven't pulled birth control off the market when 1 in 1,000 get it.
Isn't that amazing?
That's so crazy. And I honestly reading this book, hearing our conversation, it really makes me want to shout to the rooftops, because I think the biggest women's problem is we are not educated about this stuff and we don't know about our bodies. One thing that Alyssa said on I listened to her like on 3 podcasts because I was like, oh my goodness, I've never
Mal's
heard the need to hear
obsessed.
more. I'm obsessed. I'm in the Facebook group and everything now. And
There's
one
a
thing
Facebook group?
yes, you should join the
Okay,
Facebook
so I
group.
told Mal about this back in like December, January. And she finally listened to the podcast like last week.
It was last week.
And
then I
That's
bought the
awesome.
book.
I love it.
Yeah, and I bought the book like the next day because I really want to do better like with my health, and I think it's so important. You know, as my mom always, I'm in my birthing years, so I want to make sure that she says it's mom time, and I want to make sure that I'm like doing all the right things and I'm being healthy. And like I had never heard any of this stuff, and it makes so much sense. So much sense. Yeah. But anyway, one of the things she said in like all the podcasts, she was talked about like our language that we use to even talk about like our periods, like, and even the way I just said it now, like I was about to say periods because like it's
you like want to whisper it.
Period.
Exactly. And we shouldn't even be talking about it that way, or like we shouldn't talk about it as like, oh my god, this thing I've had for like over 10 years, I can't say. We should be like, oh yeah, I'm having my cycle. Like it's a, like you were saying with the 5th vital sign, because that's what she was saying in the podcast. So she said it's the 5th vital sign. So like this is a good thing. Like you should be having your period. Like it should be regular. You should be doing so. Even changing our language on how we talk about these things, I think, and that's why I really want to start like not whispering period or like I have to get a pad. Like I don't want to. I want to stop that so badly.
Like I remember when I used to be in work, I'd be like, "Hey, I started my period. Did any of you guys have pads?" But I'm like, you know what? F this. I remember, I think I had like a migraine or cramps or something. I told my male boss, I go, hey, like, I'm not feeling well. I just started my period. Do you mind if I go home? And it freaked them out.
Oh, I remember in high school.
He was just like, okay.
Yeah, in high school, all you had to say was like, "Oh, something period." They'd be like, "Okay, go do whatever you want."
Yeah, they're like afraid. Okay, but here's the thing, and I'm so glad that you guys said this because I feel really passionate about this piece of it too. Like, there's a lot of debate. There are a lot of like fertility awareness organizations popping up right now, and there's a lot of debate over like, okay, as Christians, should we be like making these secular organizations because we don't want people to be tripped up by the fact that it's like a Christian thing. Like this is the truth no matter what. And like, we don't want to bring the whole Christ thing into it. You know, that's not my phrasing. That's other people's phrasing. And that has been a real struggle for me because I feel like, no, like at the end of the day, that's why I am in this work, not because I want to convince people that abortion is bad, but because like, I believe in the truth and Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And at the end of the day, like I want to win souls for heaven, you know? And so like what you're saying is totally true and correct. Like we should be able to speak freely about periods, and the fact that we feel shame about that. Like we feel like it's embarrassing to talk about it, or like we can't speak about it in front of men.
Well, not even that, but being like, even like the sex part, like my mom didn't talk to me about sex. I didn't realize like sex isn't just meant to have babies, if that makes any sense. Until I was married. Yes. And it's like, we're not talking about like, why is it okay for a man to have pleasure with sex, but it's not okay for women to have it? Yeah. And why does the left have to take that narrative away from us too?
I completely agree with you. And I think that, and here's the piece that I think we have to, there's a balance, right? Because like, we know what it looks like when we're going out. I mean, the left does this too. They're like, let's just shout from the rooftops all about our sexual lives. And like, that's not really the answer either, you know?
Well, that's not what I meant at all. I'm just saying, why isn't just it natural? Like, I want to do better when I have a daughter. Saying, look, like, you should wait till marriage. It's worth it. But you also like, you need, and because I will say, like, I feel not like, and I think like Amber Fillerup, who's an influencer, who's Mormon, just talked about this on her blog, but she's like, I'm trying to do better at looking at sex in a positive way because my parents, my family, my church always made it look like a negative, like no type thing. Right. And I want to make sure like my daughter knows sex is a wonderful thing between a man and a wife. It's a wonderful experience and not like, oh, like hush, you know?
Well, and so yes, I'm with you 100%. And to answer to that, what I would say is the word here that I think we need to use more often than we do is that sex is worthy of our reverence. So like
Ooh, I like that.
when
That's gonna be a quote. Go ahead. I'm gonna write that down.
So like for example, when we're talking about women and we're talking about periods and we're talking about like, it's like the whole like free the nipple movement, right? Like there's this natural inclination in us as women to cover ourselves, to like, you know, and that's why this whole modesty conversation is so controversial. Like we all have, I think, that inclination to like cover ourselves. And the reason for that in large part is because women are sort of like the beholders of mystery, right? So like the Lord God is mysterious in his nature. There are things about God we will never understand. And man and woman are complementary of one another. Man reflects parts of God that only man can reflect. Women complement and reflect parts of God that only women can reflect. And one of the aspects of God that women reflect is mysteries. That's why, like, you look at the woman's body versus a man's body, for example, the men wear their sexual parts outside of their bodies. Women, our sexual parts are inside of our bodies. They're hidden. They're like, so there's this mystery there. And so when men gaze upon women, there's like a sense of mystery of like, like they almost can't fathom the beauty there, you know, like that's what that is like. And so I think when we talk about modesty, when we talk about sex, you're totally right. Like I had a mom, praise God, who sat me down when I got my period and said, this is what sex is. Sex is really special. You only have sex with your husband. You don't have sex with anyone else. And I'm 28 years old and I'm a virgin for that reason. And
good for you. Yes.
And I give full credit to my mother for that. And that's the way that we have to talk about this, is not with shame, not with hiding, but with acknowledgement of the mystery of woman, which is women are the beholders of mystery and we reflect the mystery of the Lord. But then also there has to be reverence. Like sex is an intimate act between two people. And who do they share that with? They share that with each other and they share that with God. Only God and the two people involved should behold what happens during sex. And so
this is so good.
It's reverence. It's about reverence. That's the way that I see it. And so Mallory, like I'm so with both of you, that like we have to have reverence, but we also have to be willing to say these things without shame because they are truth. Like this is the truth. We are reflective of the Lord, you know?
Yeah. So how do we, and I don't know if you know this answer or you have an opinion. Sure. Like I was taught like from like the look of like, I always taught was like, okay, sex is to reproduce. How do we look at sex that's not meant to be reproduced? Just like have sex between like a man and a wife just to have sex. Like, how do we look that as like a positive thing in God's eye? Does that make sense? Like, I always looked at sex as like, okay, pleasure? Yeah, but kind of like, I guess like I always feel like the purpose that God had for sex was to reproduce. How does God look at sex when you're not trying to reproduce yet? You know, does that make sense?
Amazing. So the really remarkable thing, it's incredible how pop culture gets some of this stuff right, but they like kind of mess it up in the process. So like people, like I always think of like, okay, what's his face? One of the Jonas brothers, Nick Jonas, he just came out with an album that he has a song about like heaven. And it's basically like him and this girl are in a relationship and it's heaven to him. And that is the ecstasy of sex, is like, it feels like heaven. And the whole idea there, like man and woman, their relationship is reflective of the love that God has for us. Like if a man and woman are married and experiencing like sex together in a married relationship that is consecrated by the Lord and is without contraceptives, like they are experiencing a totally free expression of love that can only be experienced in the Lord, in relationship with God. And it's supposed to be reflective of the love that the Father has for us, that the Lord has for us. And so the idea is that like this ecstasy that we experience in sex, like, is the closest thing that we can get on earth to what it feels like to be in heaven with God. Like, and I know that sounds crazy. I know it sounds almost
that's beautiful,
perverse, but that's what it is. And so that's why, like, as human beings, we naturally draw this analogy between sex and heaven, because that is actually the way that the Lord intended it. He actually intended for that to feel that way. And so, like, so yes, it's true that sex is meant for procreation, but it's also meant for unity. It's also meant to unite husband and wife as one soul. And again, so they're complementary of each other as sexual human beings. Their souls are also gendered. So the female soul is different from the male soul, and they're complementary of each other in that way as well. And when they come together in sex, it's like this reflection. It's the love of the Father. It's the love of Jesus Christ, how he feels for his bride, the church. And so it's so hard to like fathom and comprehend. Sorry, it's like getting darker and darker in my room.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say
all of a
anything,
sudden
but I
I'm
was like,
sitting in the dark. Yeah.
I think the sun went down.
I know. I can turn a light on in a second. I'm like, so know what I'm saying though. It's, you guys, like, it's so incredible. Pope John Paul II wrote the Theology of the Body over like a period of years.
I've heard of that.
It's amazing. Like, he basically, in the Catholic Church, the Pope every Wednesday, if he's in Rome, will go out into St. Peter's Square and he'll deliver a Wednesday audience, which is basically like a sermon on the day's readings. And he'll deliver it to whoever shows up and has a ticket, basically. So you don't have to pay for the tickets. They're free. You just have to show up and get one, basically. But you go into St. Peter's Square on Wednesday at whatever time, like 2 p.m. or something, and people will wait for hours to be close to the front, and he'll come out and he'll do the readings and he'll give his sermon, his Wednesday audience. And so over a period of like, gosh, I think it was almost a decade, John Paul II every Wednesday gave a sermon that connected to his previous sermon, to his previous Wednesday audience about human sexuality. So there's a book this thick. I have it actually. I wish it was, it's right here. It's this. So this is it. It's this thick.
Ooh,
it's like the size of the Bible.
Yeah.
Describe it. It looks like the size of the Bible.
And it's John Paul II, man and woman, he created them. And it's the Theology of the Body is what it's called. It's all about why the human body is reflective of the love of God the Father and the love of Jesus Christ and his bride, the church. It's incredible stuff. It's absolutely incredible. And for me, as someone who has worked in the pro-life movement, to bring this full circle, when I've worked in the pro-life movement and I've worked in politics, when I read this book and I think about all of the things that the Lord meant for our sexuality, and then I go out into the world and I try to do my job and I see how we're aborting babies and we're abusing women's bodies with the BS healthcare that we're giving them, and we're lying to men, feeding men pornography online, lying to them about who they are and what they were made for, lying to women about who they are and what they were made for. I just feel like this is why Feminae Vero exists, because women specifically have to know what the truth is about who they are and what they were made for. And the answer is no, they were not just made to be mothers, but our fertility means that the Lord wants us to participate in creation with him. And that can look like so many things. It can look like motherhood. It can look like giving birth, but it can also look like the two of you creating this podcast, like that's the Lord inviting you into creation with him. That's the feminine genius at work. And that's what I'm trying to promote.
Wow. Beautiful. Oh my gosh. I want you to talk in every high school and every college in the United States. Give me your GoFundMe. I don't have much money, but I can share a
Val's
link.
Giving you everything she has.
Everything I have. No, seriously, because I'm just thinking about I feel like I think the biggest problem with sex ed. So, I've said this in podcasts before. I never had a sex ed. The high school. So I went to Christian school my entire life.
I went to
elementary. Right. So I feel like we both got the exact opposite ends of it. And I think that is the biggest issue with it. We don't talk, if we can come at it from the perspective of it's something beautiful instead of just don't do it, then I think it'll change people's mind. Girls will be in certain situations, or they won't even put themselves in situations because they understand how beautiful and how important this act is, how it's reverenced. Also too, understanding your bodies. Like, if I feel like if women understood, because also too, I like what you were saying earlier about having the balance, and that's something I'm working on, like, because I do want to learn more, read more about it, but also I don't want to start reading books where it talks about how we women were gods, the universe starts in us. Like, that's too much. I just tell me like how I need to work on my body to like make sure everything's working properly. So we have to find this balance. And I don't, and if girls understood that balance, understood how like important their bodies were, important how like we are, like the truth is, we only women, no matter what anybody, only women can give birth. That is the only, and if you're, doesn't make you less of a woman if you can or if you don't, but like it's a woman only type thing. So if girls understood that, I really think that would change some minds. People wouldn't even put themselves in situations like if they just understood that little piece. But we just don't talk about it that way. We either, in the Christian community, and I'll be frank, like I've spent my entire life in the Christian community, we either don't talk about it. Like there's definitely different sects of Christianity where like I said, like the elementary / middle school I went to, like if you said the word sex, you could get a pink slip, which was to go to discipline, which was a spanking. So like you could get in all this trouble for just saying the word.
So interesting.
That's, we can do a whole podcast on that, unpacking all of that.
I'm curious real quick, like do you think if we normalize sex and not made it look like such like a bad thing, and normalize like fertility and periods and all that in the church and in Christianity, do you think our generation or the generations behind us will wait until marriage?
I think so.
I think they would. It's a really great question, and it's one that I think the fertility industry, like the fertility awareness sector, has kind of explored. So Dr. Thomas Hilgers is a doctor out of Omaha, Nebraska, who like is kind of the founder of NAPRO technology. He's kind of, I think this is correct, I'm saying this correctly, he's like the founder of the Creighton method, which is one of the methods of charting, of NFP is what we call it in the Catholic Church. And so Dr. Hilgers, I think invented this in like the 80s. I'm probably butchering some of these facts, but the thing that's really interesting is that since then he has really had a tight grip on teaching that and its materials. And there have been a lot of groups who have come in and said, we want to teach this to teenage girls. We want to equip them so that they know what their bodies are all about, what they were made for. And my understanding is that Dr. Hilgers has had some apprehension there because he doesn't want his method, the Creighton method, to be used as birth control. So he doesn't want teenage girls to have sex outside of marriage and use that as their birth control. But the thing that's really interesting about it, and I understand where he's coming from, but I think that we have to have, my philosophy is we have to have faith in truth, and we have to have faith in God, that if we equip people with the truth, that the Lord will give them the grace to do the right thing with it. And so the thing that's been really interesting is I was talking to someone just about 2 weeks ago who told me that they have found that, I think it's St. Augustine who said, grace builds on nature, that if you behave in the way that is consistent with natural order, with the way that the Lord ordered things, that grace builds on that, so that your natural inclination to grace builds on that. So what they have found is, the answer to your question is yes, that teenagers who learn charting and learn about how to observe a woman's fertility and where she's at in her cycle, that they actually do avoid having sex because they know there's just like this natural awe at the woman's body, and they know that this is something worth protecting. And so I think that that's amazing. Like, we should be shouting this information from the rooftops, and should not be so afraid of, like, you know, telling the world the truth about our sexuality. I just think that's incredible.
How do we teach our boys and men about our periods and fertility? Because, like, honestly, like, I mean, my husband has no idea what I go through my time of month. He thinks it's like just like a straight, like, the flow period, like a peeing or something, his blood coming out. Like, he doesn't quite understand
what's going on.
I was reading something, and it was said that someone's brother thought that they could turn it on and off.
Yeah.
Like they could just one day be like, oh,
Oh,
I'm not having a
yikes.
period today.
It's like a
Yeah.
faucet.
He's
Yeah, it's like a
misinformed.
faucet.
Yeah. What are men's role in this?
And
I mean,
like,
we
and
do have
I
some
like,
personal responsibility.
yeah, and
but
like
what
I've tried
about men?
explaining to my husband, and I was like, he just doesn't want anything of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great question. So my sister, I can tell you that my sister, when she teaches this to couples, she has taught Creighton method to a handful of couples who are preparing for marriage. And what she really encourages them to do is she actually encourages, okay, the woman will make the observation of like cervical mucus, for example, but the man will actually be the one to record it on paper. And the idea here is that the man is participating in like this charting process. Without,
and he does do that, like like I'd be like, okay, this is where I am on my cycle, like he gets that
that's
part.
awesome.
It's just he just doesn't get like how a period works.
And honestly, the thing is, like, we can share that with them. I think the reality is that he might not ever fully understand that. And that's again, like, it goes back to that mystery that I described before, that there is this mystery, this natural mystery about women. And I think that's something really special, right? Like that's something that's so special, that we have this like mystery about us that men will just like never quite grasp what it is. I'm saying that very creepily as I have this like light flashing in my face. So I think that's really special and really cool, that that's the case. I mean, of course, like I've had that same like wrestling in my own mind with my boyfriend of like, you know, like a couple of weeks ago, I had like a bad week, and it was for sure because I was on my period, and I was like, how do I explain this to him in a way that's like modest and like not gross, but also like kind of clues him into what's going on. And I feel like men have to kind of encourage each other in that regard to be open to that, you know, like, I mean, praise God, like my boyfriend is very receptive, and he obviously knows what I do and that I'm passionate about, all this stuff. So he's really willing to listen, but there are a lot of men who are like grossed out, and that's a choice. Like, I think that men have to be encouraged by other men to come to understand some of these things, because it is really important, and they might have daughters one day, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I'm in a Christian Facebook group. It's so funny we're talking about this, because the topic today that someone posted was like, period, should we be talking about them in front of guys? Or like, guys, how do you feel about it? And then like some of the guy, like one guy was like, I don't think it should be talked about at all. It's this woman's business. And he gave this like, actually it was kind of a sad story about how this girl ghosted him because she was on her period, and you know, all this other stuff. And then there was this one guy who was like, no, I find this thing's very fascinating. If I'm going to have a daughter one day, I want to know what is going on with her, and I want to help my wife in any way. So I do. And like, he was talking, and then he started like messaging or like commenting under the other guys, trying to get him to understand, like, hey, no, I mean, you don't have to know the full capacity of everything, but you should want to be at least interested in it. And I like how you were saying like the husband helps record it, because I do think something like this should be not a group effort. That doesn't sound right. It should be, I mean, you're doing it together. I guess it is a group effort.
Totally.
Like, it should be something that you do together, because I mean, it is a uniquely woman thing, but something that's beautiful comes out of it, and it will only work if you guys are doing it together. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, from the beginning to the end, really, because I mean, in my head, I'm not married, but I'm thinking like marriage is an all the time, everyday thing. So like intimacy is an all the time, everyday thing. I said that's another form of like going through with it.
Yeah. I think it helps in like, it contributes to the woman not being the gatekeeper based on her period, you know, like, if they're trying not to get pregnant and the woman knows she's on her period, but like, I think it puts her in a position of like gatekeeper of sex, that she's like, I'm responsible for saying yes or no, whether we do or don't. And so it kind of removes that burden a little bit and makes the man a little bit more responsible. Like, she tells him what the observation is, and then he has to sort of make the determination of, okay, because this is where she's at in her cycle, we either can or can't, you know, and it kind of involves him in a way that it would otherwise feel more like she's saying yes or no, you know, which is a funny thing in our culture today, that like women should totally be okay. Like that should be okay for them to say yes or no. And I'm not saying that that shouldn't be okay. But it's like you said, it's a partnership, right? Like, and when you marry someone, the reality is that, you know, the wife's body belongs to her husband and the husband's body belongs to her wife. And of course there's reverence and respect that comes with that. But like, it is helpful, I think, when the man is involved in that, in thinking through, like, you know, are we abstaining today or are we not?
Yeah, because I will say, like, my husband's very much like be like, hey, like, where are you in your cycle? Before we even talk about having sex. Be like, okay, where are you in your cycle? Like, I know you're bleeding last week. Where are you this week? Are you about to ovulate? Like, he has great. Like, we've talked about it enough to where, like, he does ask those questions. Like, I keep track of mine on my app. So, like, I have an app that tells me, like, and it's actually the Alyssa VD who we talked about in my she has her own app that tells me exactly where I am in my cycle, what symptoms I should be experiencing, stuff like that.
Yep.
And so,
but if you're actually having sex, shouldn't you be doing the little thermometer thing? Isn't that a thing? A thermometer? Is that a?
Yeah, there's numerous types of methods. So like some methods are just about cervical mucus. So it's just about observing the consistency of the cervical mucus on a daily basis. But then there are other methods that are cervical mucus and like body temperature. So some involve like a thermometer, not all, but so it honestly depends on the method that you prefer. I think some are just a little more reliable than others, but yeah, you're correct. Like there's a tempothermal, I think is what it's called, method for sure.
Yeah, I roomed with someone who was doing that once.
And
she
really?
was like, not to freak you out, I'm gonna have a thermometer in here and you probably don't want to touch it. And I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, continue. But yeah, you were saying the app, you guys use the app, Vic?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that was all.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you, I don't know. I was just thinking like if I was actually having sex, in my head, I'm thinking within marriage.
Yeah, that might be something we should probably look into.
Yeah. Not to like,
yeah.
I was thinking that would be, because I don't know. I'd want to be really on top of it. But then again, I also want like 18 kids. So I probably won't be doing that anyway. I'm exaggerating. Maybe not 18. But anyway, any other questions?
Did we talk enough about your organization? I know we talked a lot.
This was so great. This was so fun. Oh my gosh, are you kidding? This was awesome.
It was such good information. Oh, I remember, Mal, you sent me a book today actually about this.
Oh yeah, I did. It was in the same period conversation.
Yeah, it goes A Brief Theology of Periods. Yes, really, by Rachel Jones. Have you read that?
Wow, I haven't read that, but it sounds like I should read it. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's the Theology of Periods.
Okay, I'm
very
gonna look that up on
interesting.
Amazon.
I think it came out like last week. I think that's what the person was saying. In the
oh wow.
Yeah, it's like it right off the presses.
Yeah, here's the back of the cover. Because what does the Bible say about periods? The average woman has 500 periods in her lifetime. Oh my God. And whether yours are mildly annoying, utterly deliberating, or emotionally complicated, most of us have at one time or another asked why. This warm, lighthearted, real, honest, and at times surprising book gives a biblical perspective on menstruation, as well as a whole lot more. Beginning with periods, Rachel Jones takes readers on an adventure in theology, weaving together wide-ranging reflections on the nature of our bodies, the passing of time, the purpose of pain, and the meaning of life. One thing for sure, you'll never read a Christian book quite like this one.
Yeah, I doubt I will ever read something like that. But I mean, it does sound interesting. I need to finish the other ones. But I mean, all of this stuff, and I guess just to wrap it up, all of this stuff is so important. And I do want to go back to the whole balancing again, because I mean, I was just having this conversation with my mom. She's talking about like the season I'm in. And it's really hard to find, like right now I'm single and I'm like in my career or whatever. And it's hard to find books or like any podcast or anything that's like encouraging to like, okay, this is your time, like be with the Lord, without either being like, and then this is how you manifest the life that you want. And this is how you're going to get your dream car.
And you use these stones.
Right. You use these stones and then you pray at the moon. It's hard to find stuff that isn't like that, or like a book that's like, And nothing wrong with this, but where I am in my life, I don't really want to read anything like this, but it's like, yeah, and then this is the 6 steps to when you're Boaz. You know, it's hard to find that balance.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like it gets the same way with these type of things. So I really do like what you're doing and the Christian aspect. And I want to also speak a little bit about, you said you were going back and forth about whether it should be like overly Christian, I guess. I will say we got a review that honestly I look at almost every day, and it was like the person
Not
said,
your
I don't consider
screensaver yet.
it practically is my screensaver. But they said they're not even a Christian conservative, but they enjoy the podcast because they just like our perspective, and they don't align. They say they don't identify as a Christian conservative, but they do align with some of our values, and I think that's really important if you stick with like, you know, I'm not telling you how to run your organization, but I do think it's important, and I like that you guys have the Christian aspect of it because like you said, it is the truth. And I really do think people are going to be drawn to that, like
totally,
whether it's like obviously there's going to be those people who are going to always be what is it, a retrobate mind. There's always going to be those people, but there are going to be people who just really are like, I need this information, because we do, like everyone needs this information.
They
like
don't teach this in schools.
No,
totally.
I mean, tell us how we can help. Like
I was never taught to track my period in school. So it's either don't have sex or go on birth control.
Same. Yeah, we are not taught this stuff, and it's so important. And whether you're a Christian, whether you're conservative, you need to hear this information because it's not even. And another thing, and this is just me going on a tangent, and then I'm gonna come right back. But another thing, I always talk with my friend. And I want to start off like, I'm not perfect. Like, you know, I'm not a super saint person, but like part of the reason why you do wait for marriage is yes, to honor God, but also too, like all of the quote unquote rules God has for us are things that are like actually beneficial. Like the reality is like STDs in our generation are ridiculously high. Like it's like 1 in 3 people have herpes. It's ridiculously high. So all of these like quote unquote rules, all of these like taking care of your body, all that stuff is all for our benefit. So like you don't even have to be religious to want to, you know what, let me protect my body, let me like not abstain for like you don't have to even be religious to think that way, because I mean it's when I think about like dating, and when I get really start dating, I'm like, oh gosh, this thing's a mess. Like, so you don't have like, there are so many reasons to need this information, to use this information, to so yeah, that was just my last 2 cents. Do you guys have any last 2 cents?
No, I love this.
Awesome.
I love like
I love this too.
Because I will say, like, growing up, it was very much like sex was bad, evil. Don't do it until you're married. It wasn't never looked at in a positive light for me.
Yeah.
And so I really like what you said about how describing how like it's God's love, and like like that moment in sex is all, like a little piece of heaven.
Yeah. And the reverence. I liked the way you said that. That was, you know, honestly, that was kind of sappy, but I loved it. Like, it was really like, I liked it. I really do like, no, seriously. And I think that's, and people that listen to like sappy, like that, this is, and also too, it's the truth. Like, it's not like it's not like a movie that we're watching. This is the absolute truth. So honestly, I would love to have you back on, talk more in depth about any, like, what?
You should read the book we're reading and then come back on and discuss it from your perspective.
Sweet.
Oh yes, actually that would be great.
Okay, will you guys send me the link? I feel like I actually started in the flow. Is that what it's called, in the flow?
Yeah, the flow.
I think I actually started that book like on my phone on a flight once. So I can go back and finish it. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be really good, especially because, like I said, I don't think she's a Christian, but she's made like tiny comments here and there where I'm like, that sounds kind of.
She's very anti-birth control. Completely.
Yeah, she's very anti-birth control,
and she looks at it as like the feminist movement that we should get away from birth control.
Yeah. And as and you don't hear that from the feminist. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like there's tiny things here and there where I'm like, I wonder if she made the comment too. And then the last thing, we should definitely wrap up, but she made the comment, she said our period, it was like the original not the original sin. It was like she referenced, anyway, you can tell she was talking about how Eve, like, it's part, so like it's part of the fall. She said something like that.
Oh,
and I was like, oh, she made that
interesting. So maybe
something
she was a
like that.
Christian.
Yeah. So I'm like, I wonder if she's a
That's
Christian.
true.
And
Like
she's
our period and also childbirth is a result of original sin.
yeah.
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, Eve. But it's
Yeah.
okay because we are learning how to work with it and how
Amen.
God has made us beautiful and unique to men.
Just the way you are.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks everybody so much for listening. This has been a great episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you
Are we still donating to the billboard? Is that still up?
I think by the time this is out, it won't be. Also, too, it's like past 4,000. So yeah, we need to get a new donation this month. But
you can donate to us. We have more of these amazing conversations.
Exactly, and like one day we can be able to
Mary Kate's Foundation. Real quick, where can people? What's going to be the website? Because it's still up by the website's up. Where can people donate?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. You can donate on the website feminaevero.org. FEMINAE Vero.org.
And we'll have
you can donate there.
Yep.
All of our info is there. Yeah.
Yep. And we'll have that in the show notes, the website,
the Instagram.
And
do you care if people follow you too on Instagram? Do you care if people follow you?
Yeah, Mary Kate Knorr, KNORR is my last name. You can follow me on Instagram, and then our Instagram is just Feminae Vero. Is our Instagram handle.
Awesome.
Perfect.
So much, guys. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much again. We really appreciate it.
And I know. What will these donations be funding?
Yeah, so honestly, what they'll be funding this summer is putting together this curriculum. So we're bringing together like a couple of women who are working on this with us. Also, I really would love to start hiring people. So we would really like to, there's a couple services we want to be able to offer women. We want to be able to offer fertility advocate services. We want to be able to offer birthing doula services.
Whoa.
We're also going to be offering like nutritional specialist services because our nutrition is so tied to our hormones.
Yep.
So any donations are going to go toward funding all of those things.
Awesome.
Great. You got mine. Like I said, I don't have much, but I'll give what I can. This was so, I'm sold. Like
Thank you. You guys are so awesome.
I'm so behind this. And honestly, I think everybody listening will be too, because once again, like this is information that we need to get this out. Young girls need to get this, to hear this, like it from the rooftops. All right, y'all, everybody, thanks so much for listening. Please make sure you rate, review, subscribe, follow Mary Kate, follow
Feminae Vero.
Yep, follow that. I'm terrible pronouncing things. So yeah, follow that. All right, you guys, bye.
Hold on, one more question. Why Feminae Vero? Why that name?
It like I said, it means feminine truth in Latin. And I think that pretty much sums it up, right? Like we need to get out there the truth about femininity and about women's bodies. So that's
it. Okay. Just wanted to, because this is a confusing way to say it and spell. So I was wondering. All right. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mary Kate. We'll talk to you later.
Bye,
Bye, everybody.